It was a normal Tuesday morning when the CEO of the bank arrived at his own branch. He had been to this particular branch many times before, mostly for routine visits. But today something felt different. He parked his car in the usual spot, adjusted his suit, and took a deep breath before walking through the front door. The large glass doors swished open as he entered, the cool air inside hitting him immediately. He didn't have a particular reason for coming today, but he enjoyed checking in with the staff and getting a feel for how things were running. The bank had been his life's work. From the early days when it was just a small operation to the giant it was today, he had built this institution from the ground up. There was a sense of pride every time he walked through the doors, but today, there was something else in the air. Maybe it was the bustle of people in the lobby. Maybe it was the anxiety in the back of his mind about recent business deals. Or maybe it was just a routine visit that didn't feel routine anymore. Either way, he pushed the thoughts aside as he approached the front desk. He was greeted with the usual politeness. A young woman, perhaps in her mid-20s, was standing behind the counter. Her name tag read Lucy. She smiled at him, her eyes bright as she looked up from her computer screen. "Good morning, sir. How can I assist you today?" The CEO returned the smile and nodded. "Good morning, Lucy. I'm here for a quick check-in. I just wanted to get a feel for things, see how everything is running." Lucy's smile remained, but there was something in her eyes, something that seemed to say she was trying to remember where she had seen him before. It was a fleeting glance, barely noticeable, but the CEO caught it. He shrugged it off, figuring it was nothing more than a passing thought. He stepped up to the counter and, instead of giving her his account details right away, made small talk.
"How's everything been going?"
"Busy morning?" Lucy nodded. "Yes, a bit. Just the usual flow of customers. Everyone's in a bit of a hurry today, it seems." The CEO chuckled. "Yeah, I guess people have a way of making everything urgent." There was a brief pause before Lucy asked almost hesitantly, "Can I have your account number, sir? I just need to check your details before I proceed with anything." The CEO raised an eyebrow. "Of course. It's under my name." He recited the number for her without hesitation, though something in his gut told him that this was going to be different from his usual visits. Lucy entered the details into the system, but after a few moments her fingers stopped moving. She stared at the screen, brow furrowing slightly. The CEO waited, thinking that perhaps there was a simple technical glitch, but when Lucy didn't immediately continue, he felt the first stirrings of frustration. "Is there a problem?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Lucy glanced up at him, her smile faltering slightly. "There seems to be a hold on your account, sir. I'm sorry, but I'll need to verify some additional information before I can proceed." The CEO blinked, his face a mix of surprise and confusion. "A hold on my account?" "Yes, sir. It's a security measure. It's been flagged, and I need to check your identification." He blinked again, his mind racing. This wasn't normal. He had never had any issues with his account before. In fact, he had personally overseen the account's status just the week before. Everything had been in order. He tried to keep calm, but there was a sense of growing discomfort in his chest. "I can assure you I'm who I say I am. Can you please check again?" Lucy, still looking a bit unsure, typed a few more things into the system. But after a few moments she shook her head and looked up, meeting his eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't do anything until I verify some additional details. You'll have to wait for confirmation from the higher-ups." The CEO's frustration was beginning to build, but he took a deep breath. This wasn't Lucy's fault, she was just doing her job. But it was hard not to feel a little humiliated standing there in front of one of his own employees, with his identity being questioned. Still, he decided to remain calm. "All right," he said, his voice controlled but firm. "Could I speak to the branch manager, please?" Lucy nodded quickly, her fingers already moving to make the call. "Of course, sir. I'll get him right away." As Lucy stepped away from the counter to make the phone call, the CEO stood there looking around the branch. People moved about, oblivious to the situation that was unfolding. He noticed a few customers waiting in line, some chatting quietly, others scrolling through their phones. Everything appeared normal, except of course that he was standing here, a man who had built this bank, waiting for the manager to come and sort out what he now realized was a very unusual situation. He wasn't sure how much time had passed when the branch manager finally arrived, but it felt like a small eternity. The manager, A man in his late 30s named Peter extended a hand and smiled. "Good morning, sir. I'm Peter, the branch manager. How can I assist you today?" The CEO shook his hand, trying to mask his growing frustration. "I was just trying to get some quick help, but apparently there's a hold on my account. I'm not sure why, and I'd like to get this cleared up immediately." Peter looked at Lucy, who had returned to the counter. She nodded and explained the situation, including the fact that the account had been flagged for security reasons. The manager turned to the CEO, his face a little more serious now. "I apologize for the inconvenience, sir. I'll have to check with our security team to resolve this. I assure you we'll get this taken care of. But in the meantime, I can't process any transactions until I receive confirmation from them." The CEO's frustration was starting to reach a boiling point. "Look, I'm the CEO of this bank," he said, his voice low but edged with annoyance. "I'm the one who oversees these accounts. This should not be happening." Peter's face showed no sign of recognition. He simply nodded politely, his professionalism in full force. "I understand, sir. But as I mentioned, our system is showing a hold and I'll need to follow the procedure." The CEO took another deep breath. It was obvious that Peter didn't know who he was. He was just doing his job. But that didn't make the situation any less frustrating. The CEO had spent years building this bank, and here he was, being treated like just another customer. 7 minutes had passed. The CEO had been sitting in the lobby, watching the seconds tick by with growing frustration. He could see the staff moving around, going about their work as if everything was normal. He felt like an outsider in his own bank, a place that should have been a reflection of his vision, his hard work. It wasn't just about being denied service. It was about the realization that, despite his position, despite his accomplishments, he was just another person in the line of customers. The minutes seemed to drag on endlessly, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. How had he been overlooked in his own establishment? He had always prided himself on the personal relationships he had with his employees, the way he tried to make everyone feel like part of a team. But now, sitting there in the lobby, he felt like a stranger to them. As he sat there, the buzzing of his phone broke through his thoughts. He glanced at it quickly. An email from his assistant updating him on the status of a deal he had been working on for weeks. For a moment, he lost himself in the email, focusing on the numbers and terms. But just as quickly, his thoughts returned to the situation at hand. How could something like this happen? How could his own bank, his own staff, treat him this way? The CEO stood up and paced the small space in the lobby. He tried to push the thoughts aside, but they kept coming back. The security hold, the treatment, the lack of recognition. There was a sense of helplessness building inside him, but he didn't want to give in to it. He wasn't just some ordinary customer. He had built this bank, this company, from the ground up. This place was a reflection of his life's work, and it hurt to see it falling apart even for a moment. He checked his watch again. Another few minutes had passed. There was still no sign of Peter, the branch manager. The CEO was starting to feel that familiar tension creeping up in his chest. It wasn't just about the account anymore. It was about his identity, who he was in this space, and why no one seemed to recognize that. He had built this institution, but now it felt like the walls were closing in on him. Finally, Peter walked back into the lobby, his expression unreadable. He approached the CEO with a sense of urgency, but still with that same professional politeness. "Sir," Peter said, "I've just spoken with security. It seems there was an error in the system. The hold was mistakenly placed on your account, due to a routine check. Everything is clear now." The CEO nodded, trying to mask the anger that was bubbling just beneath the surface. "I see, so it's been cleared up?" Peter nodded. "Yes, sir. The issue has been resolved. Your account is now in good standing." The CEO took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. He had expected this. He knew it was a mistake, a simple glitch in the system. But the whole experience had left him with a bitter taste. He had been treated like just another customer, as if his position, his contribution to the company meant nothing. "I appreciate your help, Peter," the CEO said, his voice calm but with a slight edge. "But I have to ask, how is it that no one recognized me? How is it that no one knew who I was?" Peter's face remained neutral, though the question seemed to catty him off guard. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir. We all go through the same procedures. We don't typically make assumptions about who a customer is based on their appearance or status. It's part of our policy to ensure that everyone is treated equally." The CEO couldn't help but feel a surge of frustration at Peter's words. I understand equality, Peter, but this isn't just about equality. It's about recognizing the people who built this company, who worked hard to make it what it is today. Don't you think that deserves some level of acknowledgement? Peter looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Lucy, the young woman at the counter, who was now watching the conversation unfold. It was clear that neither of them knew what to say. The CEO's words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I'm sorry, sir, Peter said, his voice softening. It's just the way things work here. We don't make exceptions, no matter who the customer is. Our procedures are set in the next day. The CEO couldn't shake the feeling that something had to change. The experience at the bank had left a mark on him that he couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the error with his account. It was the way the staff had treated him, the way no one had recognized him. The lack of acknowledgement felt personal, and it bothered him more than he expected. It was as if he had been reduced to just another customer, stripped of the identity and significance that he believed should have been recognized in his own place of work. He woke up early that morning, his mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. The drive to the office felt longer than usual, his thoughts consumed with the experience from the day before. He thought about the staff, about Peter, the manager who had tried his best but had clearly missed something important. He thought about Lucy, the young woman at the counter, and how she had been so polite, yet so unaware of who he really was. When he arrived at the office, he sat in his car for a few extra minutes, gathering his thoughts. He wasn't sure what he hoped to accomplish by revisiting the situation, but he knew he had to address it. The way he had been treated was a wake-up call. He couldn't let this slide. He had to make sure that something like this never happened again, not just to him but to anyone. He walked into the office building, his steps purposeful. As he entered his personal office, he could feel the weight of the decision ahead of him. This wasn't just about his personal feelings anymore. It was about setting a standard, about ensuring that the culture of the bank reflected the values he had always held dear. He wanted his employees to feel seen, valued, and respected regardless of their role or position, and if that meant making some tough decisions, then so be it. After a few hours of working through his emails and dealing with routine matters, the CEO called a meeting with his senior leadership team. He wasn't sure what he was going to say, but he knew the conversation was necessary. He needed to express his thoughts, and he needed their support in moving forward. The staff at the branch hadn't just failed to recognize him. They had failed to recognize the importance of their roles in making the bank a welcoming, inclusive place for everyone. As the leadership team gathered around the conference table, the CEO could feel the tension in the air. Everyone knew something was off, but no one had said anything yet. The room fell silent as the CEO began to speak, his voice calm but firm. Yesterday, I went to one of our branches just like any other customer would, he began, his gaze sweeping over the team, and I was treated like one. A few of the senior leaders exchanged glances, unsure of what to say. The CEO continued, his words gaining strength as he spoke. I was denied service not because of anything I did, but because of a mistake in the system. That's fine, it happens. What bothers me, however, is the fact that no one recognized me. No one saw me for who I am. Not the CEO of this bank, but someone who has worked to build this place from the ground up. He paused, allowing the words to sink in. The room remained silent, and the CEO could tell that the team was starting to understand the gravity of the situation. It wasn't just about the mistake, it was about the lack of acknowledgement, the lack of human connection. I understand the need for procedures. I understand the importance of following the rules, he said. But there's a bigger picture here. We are a team, and we should be recognizing the people who have helped make this company what it is. We should be treating each other with respect and understanding, not just as cogs in a machine. The room was still quiet. The CEO could see that some of the leaders were reflecting on his words, their expressions shifting as they considered what had happened the day before. He wasn't angry, not anymore. He was disappointed, but more than that, he was determined to make things better. I don't want this to be just a lesson for me, he continued. I want it to be a lesson for all of us. We need to create a culture where people feel seen, where no one feels like a stranger in their own place of work. One of the senior leaders, a woman who had been with the bank for years, spoke up. I can see how that would be frustrating. We've always valued customer service, but I think you're right. We've gotten so focused on following procedures that we've lost sight of the human aspect. It's about more than just the rules, it's about the people who are behind them. The CEO nodded, grateful for her insight. Exactly. It's not just about recognizing the higher-ups, it's about recognizing everyone. Every employee, every customer, everyone plays a role in making this place work. And we need to ensure that everyone feels valued. Another leader, a younger man in his early 30s, raised his hand hesitantly. What do you think we should do moving forward? How can we fix this? The next few weeks were filled with change. The CEO's decision to make empathy, recognition, and personal connection a cornerstone of the bank's culture was not something that could happen overnight. It was a process, a journey. But as the days passed, the CEO felt a growing sense of satisfaction knowing that he had started something important. It was a busy Monday morning when the first training session was scheduled. The bank had brought in experts in customer service and workplace culture, people who knew how to foster empathy and respect in the workplace. The CEO didn't want to leave it to others to carry out his vision. He made sure he was there, sitting in the front row, listening to the speaker as if he were one of the employees. He wanted to show them that this was a top-down initiative and that he was as invested in this change as anyone else. As the speaker went over the key points, how to listen actively, how to make people feel seen, how to recognize the humanity behind each transaction, the CEO noticed the change in his staff. They were engaged. They were paying attention. For the first time in a long while, they were not just focused on their tasks, but on the people they were interacting with. One of the things the speaker emphasized was the importance of recognizing the people around you. Whether it was a customer coming into the branch or a colleague working in another department, every person should feel valued. The CEO watched as the employees nodded along, taking notes and asking questions. They were beginning to understand the importance of the change he wanted to bring about. The training sessions were held regularly, and each one felt like a step forward. The CEO would often drop by, sitting at the back of the room to listen in. He could see the transformation happening in real time. Employees began to engage with one another differently. There was more smiling, more eye contact, more recognition of each other's roles. Even in the small interactions, the difference was noticeable. It was clear that the culture was starting to shift. A few weeks later, the CEO decided to visit another branch. He had made a point to visit a different one each week, just to see how the training was impacting the staff and how they were putting the new principles into practice. It was a quiet morning when he entered the branch, but the moment he stepped inside, he noticed something different. The staff seemed more connected with one another, more present. As he approached the counter, he was greeted warmly by a young man, much like Lucy from the previous visit. But this time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. The employee smiled and made eye contact, instantly recognizing the CEO. "Good morning, sir. How can I assist you today?" the young man asked, his tone friendly and confident. The CEO smiled, genuinely pleased by the change. "I'm just here for a quick check-in. I wanted to see how things are going." The young man nodded, still smiling. "Of course, sir. I'll take care of you right away." It wasn't just the way he was greeted that stood out. It was the energy in the air. The atmosphere felt different, more welcoming. The staff were engaging with customers in a way that was more personal, more attentive. They weren't just going through the motions. They were making an effort to connect. As the CEO continued his visit, he couldn't help but notice how the employees were interacting with one another too. There was a sense of camaraderie in the air, a sense that everyone was part of something bigger. People were collaborating, laughing together, and even offering help when needed. It was a far cry from the disconnected, robotic environment he had seen not too long ago. He approached the branch manager, who greeted him warmly with a handshake. The manager, a woman in her 40s, had been with the bank for years. She was one of the first to attend the new training sessions, and it was clear she had embraced the changes wholeheartedly. "Good to see you, sir," the manager said with a smile. "How's everything going at your end?" The CEO smiled back, feeling a genuine sense of pride. "It's going well. I've been visiting different branches, and I have to say I'm impressed with what I've seen here. The staff seem more engaged, more connected." The manager nodded. "We've really been working on that. The training sessions were eye-opening for all of us. It's made a big difference in how we interact with customers and with each other." The CEO could see that the changes were taking root, and that was exactly what he had hoped for. It wasn't just about improving customer service, it was about creating an environment where people felt respected, valued, and seen. It was about shifting the culture of the entire bank, one interaction at a time. As he left the branch later that day, the CEO felt a sense of accomplishment. There was still work to be done, of course, but he could already see the positive effects of the changes. Employees were more engaged, more empathetic, and more aware of the importance of human connection. The bank was starting to feel more like a community, a place where people cared about each other and about the customers they served. But even as things were improving, the CEO knew that there was still one important thing left to address. He couldn't ignore the fact that there was a disconnect between his position and how the staff viewed him. They had treated him like just another customer, and that had hurt. But now that the training was in place and the culture was shifting, it was time to take the next step. He had made a decision to return to the branch where it had all started, the branch where he had been mistaken for just another customer. He wanted to speak with Lucy, the young woman who had been at the front desk. He wanted to see if the changes had made a difference in how she interacted with customers and with him as the CEO. When he arrived at the branch the following week, he was greeted by Lucy once again. This time there was no hesitation in her smile, no uncertainty in her voice. She recognized him immediately. The following months saw the changes that had been set in motion begin to grow and evolve. The CEO watched with pride as the bank began to reflect his vision for what it could be. A place where every person was seen, valued, and heard. It wasn't just about customer service anymore. It was about creating a culture that extended beyond transactions and systems. It was about fostering human connections at every level of the business. One morning, the CEO stood in front of his team in the main conference room. It was a familiar scene, him standing at the front, the senior leadership team seated around the table. But today was different. He wasn't there to discuss numbers or strategy. He was there to talk about the progress they had made, the journey they had been on together. "Good morning, everyone," the CEO began, his tone warm yet focused. "I want to take a moment to reflect on where we are now. A few months ago, we made a commitment to shift the way we approach our work, the way we treat one another and our customers, and I think we've made great strides in that direction." He paused, making eye contact with the leaders around the table. There was a sense of pride in the room, a collective understanding that they had all contributed to the transformation. "When I visited the branches in the beginning," he continued, "I didn't see the kind of culture I wanted to see. But now I walk into those same branches and I see a difference. The staff are more engaged, more empathetic, and more focused on the human aspect of their work. I'm proud of what we've accomplished so far." The team nodded, their faces showing genuine appreciation for the work they had all done. But the CEO wasn't stopping there. He had a bigger goal in mind, one that would take their commitment to a whole new level. "We've made great progress," he said, "but the work isn't done. In fact, I believe we're just getting started. I want us to take the next step into creating not just a culture of recognition, but a culture of trust." There was a brief silence as the leadership team absorbed the gravity of what the CEO was suggesting. Trust was a powerful word. It wasn't something that could be built overnight, but it was the cornerstone of any thriving organization. "I want us to be a company where every single person feels they can trust their colleagues, their managers, and their leaders," the CEO explained. "I want employees to feel that they can speak up, that they can share their ideas, their concerns, and know that they will be heard. And I want our customers to feel that same level of trust when they walk into our branches." The room fell into deep thought. This wasn't just about changing the way the bank interacted with customers. It was about creating a space where trust and transparency were fundamental principles. One of the senior leaders, a woman who had been with the company for years, spoke up. "That's a big step, but I believe it's the right one. We've already made such great strides in how we engage with each other and with our customers. Trust is the next logical step." The CEO nodded, grateful for her insight. "Exactly. But trust isn't just about words. It's about actions. We need to lead by example. If we want our employees to trust us, we have to show them that we trust them. We need to create an environment where people feel safe to be themselves, to make mistakes, and to grow from those mistakes." Another leader, a young man in his 30s, added, And I think we need to actively encourage open communication. If people don't feel like they can speak up without fear of being judged or dismissed, then trust won't grow. We need to give our employees the platform to share their thoughts and ideas. The CEO smiled, proud of the way his team was thinking. You're absolutely right. We need to build trust through communication, transparency, and consistency. And that starts with us, the leadership team. We need to be open, approachable, and accountable. The conversation continued, with each leader offering their ideas and feedback. They all seemed eager to take the next step, knowing that it would not only benefit the employees but also strengthen the relationship with their customers. The CEO felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was what he had wanted from the beginning, a place where people felt valued, respected, and trusted. The plan they outlined that day wasn't something that would happen immediately. It would take time, effort, and dedication, but the CEO was confident that they were on the right path. The first step was clear. They needed to develop a training program focused on trust and communication. It would be something that wasn't just about customer interactions but also about fostering a work environment where transparency was priority. Bank's transformation continued to unfold in unexpected and inspiring ways. As the weeks turned into months, the CEO began to see the results of the culture shift, not just in the way employees interacted with customers, but in how they began to interact with each other. It wasn't just about policy changes or training sessions anymore. It was about a fundamental shift in mindset. The staff had begun to believe in the vision, and that made all the difference. One day, while sitting in his office, the CEO received an unexpected phone call. It was from Peter, the branch manager from the branch where the CEO had first experienced the issue with his account. Peter had been one of the first leaders to embrace the new culture, and the CEO had kept in close contact with him throughout the process. "Good afternoon, sir," Peter said, his voice sounding upbeat. "I wanted to share some exciting news with you." The CEO leaned back in his chair, intrigued. "Go ahead, Peter, what's happening?" "Well," Peter continued, "I'm sure you remember the day you came to our branch and had that experience with your account. I wanted to let you know that since then, the team has completely turned things around. We've received the highest customer satisfaction ratings in months, and not just in our branch, but across the entire region." The CEO smiled, feeling a surge of pride. He'd known that the culture shift would take time, but hearing about the tangible results was incredibly rewarding. "That's fantastic news, Peter. I knew you and the team would make it happen." Peter paused before continuing. "There's something else. I've been getting more and more positive feedback from employees too. People are feeling more motivated and engaged in their work. There's a noticeable shift in how they view their roles and how they're interacting with their colleagues. It's like they're more connected, and that's making a real difference in the energy around here." The CEO felt his heart lift. This was exactly the transformation he had been hoping for. It wasn't just about making the customers feel valued. It was about creating a workplace where employees felt connected and valued as well. When that happened, everything else fell into place. "That's great to hear, Peter," the CEO said. "I'm really proud of the progress we've made. But remember, we still have a long way to go. We have to keep pushing forward, keep building on the trust we've started to develop." "I agree," Peter responded, "but it's clear we're heading in the right direction." After hanging up with Peter, the CEO spent the rest of the afternoon reflecting on the journey. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, moments when it seemed like the change was slow, but now he was seeing the results. It felt like the hard work was finally paying off, and it made him excited for the future. But even as he felt that satisfaction, he knew there were still challenges ahead. There would always be room for improvement, always areas where the culture could grow and deepen. The bank had come a long way, but it was still a work in progress. The CEO had set the bar high, and he wasn't about to let it slip. That evening, as the sun began to set, the CEO received a visit from one of the senior leaders, a woman who had been instrumental in supporting the cultural shift from the beginning. She had been with the company for years, and her deep understanding of the bank's inner workings had helped steer the team toward success. "Evening, sir," she said, her tone friendly but respectful. "I wanted to chat with you about something." The CEO gestured for her to take a seat. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking a lot about the work we've been doing with the culture change," she began. "And I just wanted to say that I think we've made incredible progress. But I also think we need to focus on one more area. recognizing the people who've really embraced the new culture and gone above and beyond in their efforts. They deserve to be acknowledged. The CEO nodded, already understanding where she was going. I agree. There are always going to be people who lead the charge, people who go above and beyond. We need to make sure they're recognized for their contributions. I think it would send a powerful message if we gave a formal recognition to those employees, she suggested. Not just a casual thank you, but a real acknowledgement of the work they've done to help shape this new culture. It would show everyone that we're not just talking the talk, we're walking the walk. The CEO smiled, impressed by her foresight. I couldn't agree more. It's important that we celebrate those who've embraced these changes and led by example. Let's do it. Let's plan a recognition event, something that highlights their efforts. Great, she said, visibly excited. I think it will be an important moment for the team. The CEO and the senior leader spent the next few hours planning the event. They wanted it to be special, something that felt genuine and meaningful. It wasn't about a grand spectacle. It was about recognizing the real work that had gone into making the bank a better place. A few weeks later, the recognition event took place. It was a simple ceremony, but the CEO knew it was going to have a big impact. The room was filled with employees from all departments, from the tellers to the managers, all gathered to celebrate the successes they had achieved together. As the ceremony began, the CEO stood at the front, his heart swelling with pride. He watched as employees who had truly embraced the cultural shift stepped forward to receive their recognition. These were the people who had been the first to adopt the new mindset, the first to lead by example, and the ones who had encouraged others to follow their lead. One by one, the employees were called up to receive their awards, a certificate, a handshake, and a few words of appreciation. The CEO made sure to speak personally to each one, thanking them for their dedication and leadership. The room was filled with applause and the energy was electric. It was a moment of pride and accomplishment, not just for the individuals being recognized, but for everyone in the room who had contributed to the change. After the ceremony, the CEO took a moment to reflect on what had just happened. This event, this simple recognition, was more than just a ceremony. It was a symbol of the transformation that had taken place. It was a reminder that the work they had done was real, and that the culture they had built was something worth celebrating. As the employees mingled and congratulated each other, the CEO felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He knew there was still work to do, but he also knew that they had made an incredible amount of progress. The trust, the respect, the connections, these were the things that would continue to define the future of the bank. And so, as the evening drew to a close, the CEO looked around the room and felt hopeful. This was just the beginning. The culture shift was still in its early stages, but it was already shaping the bank into a place where everyone felt seen, valued, and heard. It was a place where trust was built on every interaction, every conversation, and the CEO knew that as long as they stayed true to these values, the future would be bright. Zed. In the weeks that followed, the leadership team worked hard to bring the new initiative to life. They collaborated with external experts to design a training program that would focus on how to build trust within teams, how to communicate openly, and how to create a space where people could bring their full selves to work. It was about empowering employees to take ownership of their roles and to feel confident in their contributions. As the training sessions began, the CEO made a point to attend a few of them. He wanted to be involved, to show his team that he was committed to this process. The sessions were held in small groups, allowing employees to share their thoughts and ideas in a more intimate setting. It was clear that the staff appreciated the effort. They were eager to learn, eager to contribute to the transformation that was taking place. By the time the first few sessions were completed, the change in the atmosphere was palpable. Employees were more open with one another, more willing to share ideas and feedback. They were beginning to trust each other in ways they hadn't before. The sense of camaraderie was stronger, and there was a renewed sense of purpose in the air. The CEO knew that they weren't there yet. There was still work to be done. But as he watched his employees interacting with one another, he couldn't help but feel proud of the progress they had made. They had come a long way since that day when he had been mistaken for just another customer. And then, one afternoon, the CEO received a message. It was from Peter, the branch manager who had been so instrumental in helping with the initial changes. The message was short, but it left the CEO with a sense of satisfaction that he hadn't felt in a long time. "I just wanted to let you know that the atmosphere here has completely changed," Peter wrote. "People are talking more, sharing more, and most importantly, they're trusting each other more. It's incredible to see how far we've come in such a short time." The CEO smiled as he read the message. It was a small moment, but it meant everything. It was proof that the changes they had implemented were working, that the work they had put in was paying off. He sat back in his chair, reflecting on how far they had come. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. And as he looked ahead, he knew that this was only the beginning. The bank was becoming the place he had always dreamed it could be, a place where people were seen, valued, and trusted, a place where customers and employees alike felt like they mattered. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" The CEO smiled, impressed by her confidence. "I'm just here to check in. I wanted to see how things are going." Lucy nodded, leading him to the counter. As they walked, she made small talk with him, and he couldn't help but notice the difference in the way she interacted with him. It wasn't forced, like before. It was natural, like she was genuinely interested in helping. "I wanted to thank you," the CEO said, his tone serious but kind. "The training we've been doing, the culture we've been building, it's making a difference. I can see it in the way you're engaging with the customers. It's not just about the work, it's about the people." Lucy smiled, looking a little surprised. "Thank you, sir. I've really noticed a change too. It's made me more aware of how I can connect with people, whether it's a customer or a colleague." The CEO nodded. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. You're doing great, Lucy. I'm proud of how far we've come, and I'm excited to see how this continues to grow." As he left the branch that day, the CEO felt a sense of fulfillment. The road ahead was still long, but the progress was undeniable. He knew that the changes they had made would continue to shape the future of the bank. It wasn't just about improving customer service. It was about creating a culture of empathy, respect, and connection that would last for years to come. The CEO paused for a moment, considering the question. "We need to start by rethinking our approach to customer service. We need to integrate a sense of personal connection into everything we do, whether it's with customers or with our colleagues. It's not enough to just follow the rules. We need to make sure that we are treating people with empathy, with understanding." He looked around the room, making eye contact with each of the leaders. "I'm not saying we should abandon the rules, but we need to create a balance. We need to ensure that every person who walks through those doors feels like they belong here, that they are more than just a transaction." There was a long silence as everyone in the room took in his words. The CEO could see that they were all thinking deeply about what he had said. This wasn't just about one incident, it was about the culture of the entire bank and how it needed to evolve. "We'll start by implementing training," the CEO said, his voice resolute. "Training that focuses not only on customer service but on empathy, recognition, and creating a welcoming environment. I want to make sure that every employee knows they are part of something bigger, and that every customer knows that they matter no matter who they are." The team nodded in agreement, and the CEO could feel a sense of relief wash over him. The decision had been made. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but it was the right thing to do. It was time to build a new foundation, one that focused on people first, procedures second. As the meeting came to an end, the CEO felt a sense of pride in his team. They understood the importance of what had happened, and they were ready to make changes. It wouldn't happen overnight, but this was the beginning of something important. They were going to create a bank where everyone felt seen, heard, and valued. The CEO left the meeting feeling lighter, more confident. The road ahead wouldn't be simple, but he was determined to lead his team in the right direction. And as he walked back to his office, he knew that the changes they were about to make would not only improve the bank's culture, it would improve their relationships, their success, and the way they saw each other as human beings. 1. The CEO shook his head slowly, his mind racing. "I understand that procedures are important, but they shouldn't blind you to who's standing right in front of you. I'm not just some customer walking through the door. I'm the one who built this place." Peter looked like he wanted to respond, but instead he fell silent. The CEO felt a pang of disappointment. He had expected more recognition, more understanding. But it seemed that the bank's staff didn't quite see things the way he did. They followed the rules, yes, but they missed the bigger picture. "I'm going to have to think about this," the CEO said, his voice quiet but firm. He gave Peter a final glance before turning away and heading for the door. As he left the branch, the cool air outside hit him like a wave. He walked to his car, still feeling a sense of disbelief at what had just happened. How had things gotten this far? How had he, the very person who had built this bank, been treated like a stranger in his own institution? As he drove away, the CEO's mind kept replaying the events of the morning. The denial at the counter, the lack of recognition, the way the staff had followed procedures without question. It wasn't just about the account. He could have gotten that fixed in minutes. It was about something deeper, something that went beyond the surface. What had happened in that brief interaction was a reminder of how easily people could lose sight of what really mattered. In their efforts to treat everyone the same, to follow the rules, they had overlooked the person who had made those rules possible in the first place. He wasn't just another customer. He was the CEO, the founder, the one who had poured his blood, sweat, and tears into making this bank what it was. And yet, in that moment, he had been nothing more than a nameless face in the crowd. The CEO didn't know what the next steps would be, but he knew one thing for sure. This experience had changed him. He couldn't go back to the way things were. Something had to change, not just in his bank, but in the way he viewed himself in the institution he had built. He couldn't let the same thing happen again, not to him, and not to anyone else. And as the car hummed along the road, the CEO made a promise to himself. He would take what had happened this morning and turn it into something positive. He would use this experience to become a better leader, to ensure that no one in his company ever felt the way he had felt today. No one should ever have to walk into their own bank and be treated like a stranger. "Fine," he said, his voice tight. "I'll wait." He moved away from the counter, taking a seat in the lobby area. His mind raced as he thought about how this had all unfolded. How could something like this happen in his own bank? Why hadn't the staff recognized him? Was this a simple mistake, or was there something bigger going on? As he sat in the waiting area, his eyes scanned the room. He noticed the staff still moving around, but they seemed unaware of the tension that had just entered the space. The CEO's heart sank as he realized how disconnected his employees seemed to be from the real workings of the bank. He had always tried to make sure the staff felt valued and included, but now, sitting there, he wondered if his efforts had been enough. Minutes ticked by, and as he looked at the clock on the wall, he realized that 7 minutes had passed since Peter left to make his call. It wasn't a long time, but it felt like an eternity to the CEO. The frustration was building again, but he held on to the hope that the situation would resolve itself. Finally, he could hear footsteps approaching. He glanced up, expecting to see Peter returning with the resolution to this bizarre situation. Instead, a strange thought crossed his mind. Maybe, just maybe, he was about to find out something that would change everything.